So with that, I want to go ahead and formally introduce today's session. So welcome to Mind Matters at Home. My name is Karen Reynes. I'm the Executive Director for NAMI Central Texas. I'm delighted today that we're having a session on baking for healing. And Sascha Biesi is our speaker today. She's the co-owner of Skull and Cakebones, which has done just they have just fabulous baked goods, but they're also such an advocate for mental health, and you'll find out why as Sascha begins to tell some of her story. So we're delighted to have Sascha here with us today. Sascha, welcome to Mind Matters at Home. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me, you guys. It's really an honor to be here and to be talking to y'all. Where am I? Can you see me? Okay. Well, it's just an honor to be here and to be able to tell my story. For so long, I was, okay, good. I, for so long was, like a lot of people, I really allowed this stigma to wrap itself around me like a cocoon, and I could just barely peek out my little hole. And I had a little mouth hole where I could tell lies about whatever was going on with me and reasons why I couldn't do this, that, or the other. And especially when we started the company, I was very afraid for people to know that I had struggled with mental health issues. I'm in my mid-40s now, and I got my first diagnosis when I was my daughter's age, 18. I was diagnosed with depression. At the time, my doctor told me that if I ate more meat and potatoes, I'd probably feel better because, you know, that's what all the stressed businessmen eat, meat and potatoes, and they do it because they're stressed out by work, and so that's what they do. And the next person that I saw told me there was no way that I could have anything like that because I came across so personable and look, you're so healthy and young and whatever. So it really took a while before anyone would really hear me. Once I got someone to really listen, I was at my 5th college in 6 years. Thank goodness, still thank goodness for St. Edward's University and their amazing student services, mental health services. That was the first time I had an opportunity to speak with a real counselor that I felt really heard me. And it was really the first time I'd ever talked to a psychiatrist that really wanted to know what it felt like to be me. And I remember drawing this drawing for her because I said, you know, it's just weird. It's not like an up and down and up and down. I feel like there's like up and downs in ups and the downs. And so I drew this sort of like thing like this. And that was when I received my bipolar diagnosis. And there's been a lot of things added along the way, but I don't know necessarily that all that matters really for me anymore. For a long time, I wanted to wear my diagnosis on my forehead a little bit so that people could understand that I was struggling deep down, that I couldn't show it. And then I just got to where I knew I couldn't show it, so I just did that thing with the big stigma fur coat and wrapped it all around myself. It wasn't until 2009 when things really started to get bad for me. I was hospitalized 4, maybe 5 times that year. And I went from living in my closet to living in my backyard in a tent. It was kind of a really scary time when I look back on it, what I can remember of it. After that, I had electric shock treatments in October of 2009. It ended in December of 2009. The day my dad had a brain aneurysm was the last day that I had shock treatments. And I always say, maybe my dad's brain breaking saved mine from breaking, because already at that point, I was struggling to remember things. I was struggling to know who I was already. I didn't recognize myself in the mirror anymore. I could hardly remember my daughter's name or definitely anything else. After my dad passed away in January, I went and stayed with my family, and I couldn't find my way to the grocery store in the town that I grew up in, and I couldn't remember what I was doing, when I was doing it, or where things were. And of course, I found my keys in the refrigerator many, many times. But I got sort of used to this thing that was different about my brain. And it was hard not to say broken and wrong and to use those very stigmatizing words, because I've always been really hard on myself. And by January of 2010, I weighed less than 100 pounds. And it was clear that I was sick, but I really wanted to recover. So I started with my grandmother's recipe box. I couldn't remember anything. I couldn't remember two things together. So I had two things that I knew I needed to accomplish. I needed to gain weight because that wasn't going to help me get healthier. And I needed to feed myself in order to do that. But I also needed to start remembering things. So that was why my grandmother's recipe box was so sort of such a turning point and so poignant in my life. I mean, I have a tattoo of it on my arm. People are always like, you're a vegan chef. Why do you have a lobster on your arm? It goes deeper than that. It was so like, nothing was familiar at all. Not my family, not my friends, nothing was really familiar at that time, not even my own child. And it was really scary. So to go into this recipe box and be able to see my mom's handwriting, see my grandmother's handwriting. And I always am really proud to say that I was raised by strong Texas women. So it kind of gave me this feeling of inner strength as well, that I could do it. And so, you know, I would pull one of these recipes out and I would go, okay, it's a cup of flour, and then I would turn around. I go, dang it, what was it again? It's a cup of flour. And I'll turn around and I would go, right, it's a cup of flour. And I would get my cup of flour and then I would go, okay, it's half a cup of oil and half a cup of sugar. And then I would try to remember two things at once. And I would turn around and I would go, okay, I know it was sugar. It was like that for a really long time. Just trying to string more than two things together was going to be impossible for me. So I tried to just work the recipes, And this was, you know, for a long time, the story that I would tell people about how I became a vegan baker and how this whole thing came to be was because I was a mom with a kid with allergies, which is true. When Ruby was born, she had allergies to milk and dairy, basically, and eggs. She would break out in rashes from the dairy, and she would break out around her mouth from the eggs. So we went vegan early on because I was already a vegetarian, so it was no big deal. We just went vegan. And so that was always the story that I told. Oh, well, I went vegan because of my baby. And it's true. That's very true. But, you know, I did this whole, like, my mom's story of how the business started, because that's so much easier for people to digest instead of this, like, I was a sick mom. I had this child and this ex-husband that it was just all like, I didn't remember anything. I was a sick mom. And after all of that, I wanted to get better, but I couldn't tell people it was because I was a sick mom. I was a sick person. I was so sick. And I was desperate to save myself. And I just, after a while, I could remember two things at once. And then after a while, yeah, you know, no, it's weird. So I don't know if you guys can all see it. Someone just asked if my memory returned. No, not really. There's like 5 years. So it was 2009 when I had it. My daughter was born in 2001. So there's like this gap of about 5 years of her very early days where, you know, still to this day, she'll go, oh my gosh, do you remember when we did that? And we did that. And I really don't know what she's talking about. And, you know, for a really long time, that would hurt me on such a deep level, but I just started either saying yes because I wanted her to relive it with me, and it feels so good to do that because then in a way I feel like I'm remembering it. But honestly, there's so much that's gone, and my short-term memory is really kind of a mess now too, which is so, I mean, if I spend a week away from the kitchen and I come back in, it's almost like I don't know what I'm doing there anymore. So my short-term memory is kind of still a little bit weird from it. You know, when people ask me, what do you think? Do you think it was worth it? I don't know, because what was weird too is I was teaching yoga. I'd been a professional singer, dancer, actor for 20 years of my life. And I could memorize a script like that, and I was a performer. So it was no problem to learn things, to memorize things. So losing that ability right off the bat was like, wow. But then also right up until I had ECT, I was teaching yoga. And when I got out of ECT, I was like, yoga? That's weird. And I had done so much training with so many amazing teachers, and it's like, it never happened. So in a way, I lost a career out of it as well. And, you know, I almost lost my daughter too, because I was not in the same city. I didn't know where I was when I was here in Austin anymore. So I was up in the DFW area. And one day my mom said to me, I guess we'll just have to get used to not having Ruby in our lives. And I was like, what is happening? So I force things a lot. I force them, even though I don't necessarily have a connection or a memory necessarily. I know it's important to find it, create it, hold on to whatever I can, because it did return a little bit, but mostly not very. But my ability to learn things has been a lot better. I now have 2 recipes memorized. I know it's silly, but I can make you a vanilla cake and I can make you a chocolate cake, no problem. Let me see if I can see the whole message. I can only see, was it worth it? Do you feel, okay.
Sascha, that question was, was it worth it, or do you feel less depressed?
I feel like, you know, I feel like everything happens for a reason. So I do feel like I feel like, oof, it's such a tough question. Yeah. I honestly wouldn't recommend it, because I feel like maybe it got me out of some life situations. Maybe I needed something to happen to shift it, to change it. But, you know, here I am. A year ago, I was back in the hospital, and I've spent a year now of trying to find a medication combination that would work to try to keep myself, because for me, my most severe symptom is like anyone else. It's trying not to kill myself. My brain goes hard on that one. It's like, kill yourself. That's just it. My brain, every day, it's like, are you trying to kill me or not today? I can't tell. So getting back on meds, and I feel like I'm still me. It's like an experience that happened to me. It changed me in a lot of ways, but I don't think that it, you know, I still don't know what I look like in the mirror. I still don't know what my hair is supposed to look like, what I like to wear as clothing. I had a real sense of self, I think, before that. And it really took away that sense of self. So in a way, all the Skull and Cakebones stuff has really been good for me, because it's helped me to create a sense of self. It's allowed me to like dig deep back into my theater background and go, okay, well, I'm going to create this character. Who is she? You know, she's doing all of this, and this is why. And that was a big reason why I finally sort of started talking about my mental health, because I realized, oh my God, if I can do all this, anyone can do anything, honestly. And it became really empowering for me to start to tell my story and to say, you know, electric shock treatments was my, well, I don't know now. It was just a very low point at that time. I thought it was the lowest, but I'm not sure still. But I think this has helped me a lot to, you know, give me purpose and help me remember what I'm doing.
Sascha, we've had a couple of people ask, one in the Q&A and then another here in the chat, really about the memory piece and asking, was that the ECT, or somebody else asked, or is that the bipolar disorder? I know that we've worked with, as an organization, worked with some folks that have had the ECT. And again, my experience with that is not personal, but just from hearing other people talk about it, it's a little bit different for everyone.
Yeah.
But I have heard that memory loss is fairly a typical side effect of that. And so do you think that that's what it was?
I do. And, it's funny because for a long time I struggled with trying to find, I knew that I wanted to talk to some people that could relate to what I had been through. And I found myself actually at a brain injury group that was like finding my people. But there was someone there who thought ECT hung the moon and was really very strong in that feeling. And it made me feel like, oh, I'm an imposter, I shouldn't be here. But honestly, the brain injury group was the first time I felt like, oh my God, because I had 13 bilateral treatments in a month and a half. So that's a lot of car crash concussions. But yeah, I realize everybody's different. And now I'm 10 years on, I do think, oh my God, it's gotta be, I'm definitely positive that the ECT created a huge amount of memory loss and a lot of short-term memory issues. Now, 10 years later, I don't know that I can blame ECT. I'm pretty sure I'm working on a physical health diagnosis that's gonna help explain a lot of my brain fog stuff now, because I feel like at this point, I can't really blame ECT anymore for why my brain's doing what it's doing. And so, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the manic depression and the anxiety and whatever physical stuff I've got going on. So I don't blame it anymore. And it's whatever, really. Did that help answer?
I think it did. Thank you.
Yeah. What benefit did I get from the ECT? What benefit did I get? That's a really good question. Well, I didn't kill myself. So I guess that's what I got out of it. I stayed alive, and I decided to turn it into a turning point in my life where I wanted to turn it into something that happened for a reason. And I feel like I wish someone had tested my hormones, run a blood panel, done a brain scan before, so that we would have had a before and after. Because when I say my brain was different afterwards, I mean my brain was different afterwards. Sascha Biesi before ECT was a completely different person than Sascha Biesi now. It's definitely different. So yeah. I feel like I wish a lot of different things. I had a hysterectomy in 2006, so it's very possible that my hormones could have been messing with me. Do I wish that they had tried some other things more aggressively first? Kind of. I was wearing black when I weighed less than 100 pounds. I looked like I was dressed for my own funeral every day. I can see why they suggested it. But I do think that before someone signs up for something like that, because the thing with ECT is it's like there's something broken in there, or misfiring, let's say. And so the electric shock's like, oh, there's something misfiring in there, so let's go in there and fix it. But it doesn't pinpoint where the break is or whatever. It doesn't know where it is, so it just shocks. And while it's shocking, it's hoping it's going to break that bad connection, right? And in the meantime, it just does a bunch of damage all around. But the whole idea is, well, at least it's getting in there and getting the thing. So that part of it, I'm not too crazy about. So I wish a lot of things, but I can't undo it. So I've done it now. I wouldn't call myself a spokesperson for it. I also wouldn't call myself somebody who would write a book about how bad it is, or, get mad at my doctors or anything. It's just definitely a defining moment in my life that is so hard to explain, as you can see. And it's really hard to help people to understand this on me now, but yeah. Y'all are frozen, so I don't, okay. Oh yeah, of course. I'm really happy to take all the questions. Okay, so I can't, everyone's frozen. So I'm just going to, if anybody has any more questions, if I didn't answer anything, go ahead and ask, because I'm happy to be interrupted at any time. So I'll say that one thing ECT did for me was I woke up with like these new abilities, I guess. The one thing that my brain can do is it can come up with recipes now. I don't know if that's because I started out with my grandmother's recipe book, just working the recipes, and that was part of it. I started converting her recipes to vegan just because it's just what I do. And I have been baking vegan for so long that even though, I mean, so like Ruby's 18 now, so I went vegan originally when she was 6 months old. Since then, I've gone in and out of being a vegetarian and stuff, but that's life. But I was always still baking vegan. It was just like, I don't know, easier. And also I never had any ingredients. So I would bake for her class, and it was easy because the kids always had allergies to different things, and I was used to that. So it was kind of fun doing this kind of stuff, and I really enjoyed converting things. And I was still just baking vanilla and chocolate because I was just, you know, my grandmother and my mom, I grew up in the kitchen with them, so I loved being in the kitchen. I love baking with my family. We have, of course, like Pink Panther cake and the Texas sheet cake and our things that are like, these are my family's baked staples. And I always loved all little things my mom would do for tea parties and stuff. And so I have a real fondness for being in the kitchen. So, you know, I've always been a very creative person. So we did this event for Jester King's 2nd anniversary party. And one of the stipulations for the event was that we would use their beer in some of our recipes. And I was like, I mean, I'm just baking vanilla and chocolate here, but okay. And it was so much fun. I loved it so much because I had this weird, crazy ingredient that I've never used. I mean, I basically am teaching myself to bake all along this whole time. And man, those recipes just came together, and I just like, I'm given this weird ingredient, and it just sort of like, my brain just goes tick, and it just knows what to do, which I don't know where I got that ability. And so I'm like, thanks, ECT. But I love kind of the way that we've been able to play with our partnerships. So we partner, just a little bit about Skull and Cakebones. We partner with other local businesses, and we take something of theirs that we love, and I incorporate it into the recipe, but I don't just like incorporate it in there like you might add a pinch of cinnamon. It's like the star of the recipe. And we co-brand. If you've seen our stuff in the stores, you see we've got somebody else's logo on our stuff as well, because community really matters to us, our food community, our people community, and you know, that's another reason why I thought it was important, because, you know, in this business, there's this kind of like stigma of talking about mental health, but here we are all in our kitchen, the island of misfit toys, you know. It feels good to talk about it now. And it feels good coming up with these recipes because, you know, I'm making cakes with things, and the trifle little cake in a jar things that we've got, where I'll take kombucha and I'll make it into lemon curd. Like, it's so fun to do that stuff, and it really keeps me going, I think. And what's interesting is I don't necessarily have all the professional skills in the kitchen, but somehow I know how to do it. And I swear, I say, you know what, that was just shocked into my brain. You know how some people are electrocuted and suddenly they're speaking French? That's how it feels to me. Is like, one day I woke up and I could speak French. And for some reason, this works. And I might sit on a recipe in my brain for a week, but I'm telling you, when it finally comes out, it mostly works. And, you know, God bless Jessica. At work, I can hand her these things that just like spit out of my brain, and she just turns them into what they're meant to be. And it's great having people like that around me that I can really work with and bounce things off of, and that also know who I am and know my story, and that I've been able to trust and be honest with, has been a huge part of, you know, not admitting to, but, you know, opening up about my mental health struggles and how it is a daily thing. And now, you know, it took me this whole year of trying to figure out and going to the doctor and going, I know there's nothing you can do to help me. Nobody's been able to help me. And he's like, I'm going to help you. I don't care what it takes. And he did. We found a med combination that worked and all this stuff. And it's like, wow, I mean, I was gonna kill myself. I had a plan almost. I didn't, but I felt like I did because my brain was overwhelmed with side effects of my illness. And for me, understanding that this suicidal constant thing in my brain is a symptom of my illness. When I call my doctor and I say, I need to describe a symptom that I'm having. It's not an action plan, it's a symptom, and I need help controlling the symptom of my illness. And getting control of all that was awesome. But now the physical body stuff is starting to take its toll on me now. So having people around me that understand all of me and can work with that is so freeing in my life. And I feel like it allows me to be the best version of myself as what I'm able to be now, and to be able to come up with stuff, sometimes on the fly. Like I came up with a new recipe just for today. So I see what time it is. Should I go ahead and start baking? Do you guys want to bake?
Yeah, let's bake.
Yeah? Okay.
And then people can keep, you know, asking questions if they want along the way. But yeah, I want to see what you did.
Okay. So it's Mental Health Awareness Month. So I love analogies. So I decided that, first let's talk about mugs. Okay. We have this like crazy array of mugs, right? Because Yas likes to collect mugs, and I also like mugs. But so we're gonna do a mug cake, but let me talk about mugs. So I'm thinking, you know, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. So mugs. We've got all these different mugs. And for me, like, mugs are like people, okay? So I've got my old, found at Goodwill rainbow mug. I love it. It's from the 80s. Yay! And then this one is from my sister-in-law's wedding. And I love this one because she and her husband put their handprints on it. So this is a really cool mug. This one is like so old. It's got a couple of like, it looks like cracks on the inside. That's whatever. And this one definitely has cracks inside. And then this one is like my favorite mug, okay? He's like this little fatty, but look, he's all chipped around the outside and stuff. But like, I'm chipped around the outside too. So I had this thought about mugs and like how we keep them, because they're just us. They're just extensions of us. They give us our to-go in the morning coffee and our relaxing tea at night, or whatever we drink out of mugs. My sister's like, these Zoom meetings are great. Just tape a tea bag and have it hang over here. And then you put whatever you want to in your mug. But mugs are like these things, right? Everybody's got at least a mug. So I started thinking about mugs and how they are chipped sometimes and we keep hold of them, or they won't get all the way clean on the inside, but we know they're clean and we love it so much. Like what's on the outside, we just see that, okay? It's the mug, it's the person, it's the whatever necessarily. When I look in the mirror some days, I'm like, wow, where am I doing with all this luggage? So I decided we're gonna make a mug cake, because if we're all cracked and chipped, feeling on the outside, we can still look inside and find something really special and wonderful. So I made up this recipe. If you're following along, grab a piece of paper and a pencil or a pen, and you can write it down. And then I guarantee you can just go make it right when we're done. Okay, so disclosure. I had never made a mug cake before. I know they're a thing, but I just thought it would be something so perfect and to come up with a totally unique recipe just for you guys. Because also, sometimes you just need some cake. You know what I mean? Like you're like, oh, I just want a little bit of cake. So I thought, this is perfect. And also because I went through this the other night, I was like, oh my God. And I never do this, but I was like, I need cake. So this is gonna be great for all of us, right? All right. So you get your mug, whatever size, it doesn't really matter. We'll also make sure, see, I can't see all the messages, but all the people, right, yeah. Okay, so I'm just gonna go.
That's just me letting folks know that we'll make sure to send them something in writing too.
Oh, good, okay, good. All right, so you're just gonna take your mug, whichever mug you pick. Then you're just gonna put, it's like a dump cake. We're gonna put everything in there. So I've got 2 tablespoons of flour. I have 1.5 tablespoons of sugar, 1.5 tablespoons of cocoa powder. And then in here, I have a pinch of salt and about 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder. If you don't have, like I only could find my tablespoon measurer this morning. And this is my thing, like, Joss is always like, why do you keep telling people what you don't have? And I'm like, well, because that's real. All my good stuff is over at the kitchen. I'm at home. I'm a home baker now. So, I mean, my sister, when she came over here, she tried to make something in my KitchenAid mixer, and I forgot to tell her that it only has 1 speed, which is like from nothing to like 1,000,000 miles an hour, and it went all over the kitchen, and she did this whole little sister thing. She was like, it's ruined. And it was so funny because I totally forgot to tell her that, but that's what it's like here. And so I can only find my tablespoon measurer. So it's just whatever. It's a pinch of salt and it's 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder. But if you don't have a teaspoon measurer, it's a pinch of salt and like a double pinch of baking powder. So I'm going to put that in there too. So we've got all of our dry ingredients in our mug. See? And then we're just going to give it a little stir just to incorporate it all. I went with chocolate because, I mean, chocolate makes everything feel better for me. Okay, so in here, I've got 3 tablespoons of almond milk and 1 tablespoon of oil. I've got canola oil in here. You can melt coconut oil if you want to. You can melt butter if you want to. Earth Balance is great. It's got a little bit of water in it, but that's fine. So I'm going to just put my liquid right in there. And then you're just going to give it a stir just to incorporate everything. And you just microwave it for 1 minute. Be right back. So for the impatient ones like me, 1 minute is perfect because when I need cake right now. So, okay. What I did before this is I just made some simple chocolate ganache. This is one of those things that you hear like the word ganache and it sounds, even to me, and when I see things that say ganache, I'm like, ooh, fancy pants. But I like to teach people how to make quick and easy ganache that's almost foolproof every time. All it is chocolate chips and a little bit of plant milk. You just stir it up in your microwave. I always say, like, put the chocolate chips in there and then enough milk where it's just like you can see it at the top, like it's chocolate chip cereal almost. And then I put it in the microwave for 30 seconds and give it a stir, and then longer if you need to, and it should come out like this. Ooh, chocolate. And that's it. You've got super easy ganache. So since I knew I'm doing chocolate cake, I went ahead and melted my ganache. I think our cake is done. Be right back.
So Sascha, on the ganache, do you have a sense of proportion? Like,
I mean,
chips
like,
to milk?
Yeah, you could do like, this was like maybe 1/4 cup of chocolate chips, and then you would put like maybe half of that in milk. You know, chocolate chip cereal. I know, that's my best way to describe it. I'm like, that's not enough milk. It doesn't yet look like cereal. And I mean, some people like less milk and some people like more milk. But if you were making cereal for like a cereal commercial, just put that much milk. But yeah, I mean, like, the thing with, okay, here's the thing with ganache. If it's too thin, add more chocolate chips. Add more chocolate chips. If it's too thick, add a splash more milk.
Okay.
It's like, I can give you measurements, but it's really just
Don't
chocolate
overthink
chips.
it.
Yeah, don't overthink it. Yeah, because this is like homemade ganache that will impress your friends. You know, once you know how to do this, you're like set. Ice cream, eat it. But yeah, it's kind of like if you were going to do a 1/4 cup of chocolate chips, you'd do like maybe half of that in milk, and then do it for 30 seconds and stir it, and then see where you're at. You'll be able to tell if you need more milk, basically. So our cake is done. I'm just so excited that I know how to make mug cakes now. Y'all don't even know. Done. So it's
Wow.
like, can you see it? Did you see it? It's all fluffy. Basically, it's like making a cupcake, because that's what I did. I took my cupcake recipe and I scaled it. Like, it's so fluffy in there. Look.
Okay, you're making us all hungry over here.
Can you see it? Look at that.
Yeah.
Fluffy, y'all. Okay, so what you really want to do then, I mean, like, that's not good enough. Please take your ganache.
I love this because it's also, you know, we've got so many folks who have their kids at home right now.
Oh my God, this is great to do with the kids.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just feel like it would be such a fun and easy thing to do with your kids, and super fast, because they also sometimes don't have a whole lot of patience, right? So.
And look at that.
So I'm curious, Sascha, why you think, I mean, clearly I've heard you say this before. I mean, we call this, you know, baking is healing. I mean, so what is it about, and do you think that, you know, that is so therapeutic for you when it comes to baking? And how might that be true for other people as well?
You know, baking is great because you really have to follow the directions. It's not like cooking where you know, maybe a little bit of this and maybe I add a little more of that and you've got all of that. Whereas with baking, it's real, the chemistry is important. So you really have to, there's kind of like, it's like math. There's like rules to it. You have to follow it. There's steps involved, you know. If you're doing traditional baking, it's like cream the butter and the eggs and the sugar and all that. With what I'm doing, I don't have that, but it's still the same. You mix all your dry and you mix all your wet and you mix them together. You know, there's like this process involved in it that doesn't require you to think as much necessarily. You can just kind of get a recipe and follow it. Yeah. And if, like with the mug cake, if you want to get creative with it, now you've got this little trick you've got up your sleeve. Okay, put blueberries in it. Don't put chocolate in it. Put a little splash of vanilla in it. Instead of using soy milk, use a little bit of soy milk and lemon juice and some lemon zest to make yourself a little lemon cake. And then you just do powdered sugar and lemon together and you've got a little drizzle. You know, if you have some baking skills or if you feel comfortable about doing different things, you really can when it comes to baking. But if you don't, but you want to follow a simple recipe, yeah, that's what I like about it, because it makes you follow something from beginning to end. So you can watch your progress as you go, which is very satisfying, makes me feel really good, like I'm accomplishing something. And then when you're done, you have something that almost, you know, for me, I make things all the time and they don't come out. They still taste good, you know, and I still have learned something from it. So I feel like I've had this whole experience when I get in the kitchen to bake something.
I'm almost hearing, actually, as I hear you explain it, I love it, because as I'm listening to you, really what I heard was mindfulness. Yes. And we talk a lot about in the work that we do, and I don't ever want to diminish the power of that, which is the being present in the moment, because otherwise we're either focused on the past and reliving all of that and wishing we'd done things differently, or especially right now, I think a lot of us are fixated and overwhelmed by the future and all the things we can't control, right? And so the beauty of mindfulness, whether you're doing that through breathing or meditation or baking, right? I mean, there's all different kinds of ways. I hear you saying what it does is, here's this very specific recipe that you've got to follow. And so you're focused on that. And what I love about that you don't get out of breathing or meditation, although there's other gifts there, like with the baking, you actually end up with this, something you get to eat and share with others. And so then
Right.
there's that additional gift. So I love
Right.
that.
Right, because, you know, if that's like, to further what you're saying, that thinking about the past, there's your depression right there. That worry about the future, there's your anxiety right there. But when you're right here, that's all you've got. And that's the staying present. That's the mindfulness. That's the exactly what you're saying. Nobody talked to me about cognitive behavioral therapy or any mindfulness, any of that before I had ECT. And I feel so much wiser now having that knowledge in my mind. And I see how baking centers me and makes me focus on something.
Yeah. I want to share, seeing some of the things that people have been sharing of just, somebody was saying, how I guess that explains all the people right now that are baking bread and starting sourdough starters and all of that. Right. And then somebody else mentioned, and I love this, especially since you brought out your little, I love your little container of, I've got one like that too, right? But somebody else mentioned, and when I bake recipes for my mom or my grandmother, I feel connected to them.
That's exactly why I started doing this. Yeah, it's that connection to something. When you feel disconnected, which right now it's hard, it's weird. And that feeling of connection to any, like the handwriting, the family, I totally get that. Yeah.
So I'm curious because somebody mentioned about how somebody said, hey, you just blew my mind with all the creativity ideas. Those are great ideas. And I wouldn't have thought about thinking outside of the recipe. So I'm curious because I know from watching you on Instagram and visiting your bakery and all of that, that you are constantly thinking of these new ideas and new ways, especially because you're so focused on the vegan piece of you can't tell from eating your baked goods that they're vegan, right? Because they're just delicious. So I'm curious your thoughts on just, I sort of hear you saying that, and I think it's important for people to have permission, which is it's okay to experiment. And sometimes something, I have to assume that some of the recipes you've come up with that you've had to experiment in, some of the things you've created haven't necessarily been fantastic the first time.
Oh yeah, somebody told me to try a sugarless cake and to bake it with agave, and I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And I baked it, it came out, it looked so beautiful. And I was like, wow, I got it in one. And I took a bite of it and I was like, bleh. It was the worst thing I've ever tasted in my whole life. So yeah, I mean, there's all the time when things don't come out, but you can kind of, here's what's cool about baking too, is once you start doing it enough, when things don't turn out, you can almost trace it back. So it gives you this, again, I have this really nagging bad thought. Okay, let me trace it back, why that started. And you can find a place where you saw something, you read something, you had a dream, I don't know, it triggered me. Oh, that's why I'm having this bad thought. With baking, when something doesn't come out right, you can go kind of like, oh, I see where that came from. So that next time you know better. So next time you've learned a little bit more.
And maybe that kind of addresses, we did have somebody that asked, I thought this was a great question. My daughter is such a perfectionist that she gets overly anxious if her baking doesn't turn out the way she expected. Any suggestions? And I feel like you've kind of alluded to that, but anything else that you would add to that? I mean, I think some of it is about giving yourself the freedom to say, oh, well, it didn't work out. That was an experiment. Let's try again.
Well, you know what I would say, if she's really an avid baker and she really loves baking, then I would really enforce how, to be self-taught. I'm a self-taught baker. So it is important that things don't turn out right, because that is the only way I'm going to learn to recognize little things here and there. I've had no one teach me why stuff does what it does, that it engages my kind of common sense, problem-solving brain when things don't turn out right, because I'm teaching myself something. So to be self-taught, I really think is impressive. So I would just talk about how impressive that is to be self-taught, and that as someone who is self-taught, you have to fail at stuff a little bit in order to learn and grow and get better at it. And having those expectations of it coming out perfectly every time, you might hit that sometimes where it does, but a lot of times it won't. But it'll teach you enough but the next time it just might.
Yeah. So I haven't any other questions come up, but please, if you guys have any other questions, we're down to about our last 9 minutes or so. But I was curious about, obviously you're a vegan baker. And so I think for any of us like me, for instance, that grew up, you know, doing traditional baking, any ideas on whether it's, you know, cookbooks or, you know, any suggestions you'd have in terms of good resources for those of us who maybe want to try to experiment with vegan baking? Because when you talk about it being sort of almost a science, like there is I'm assuming that with certain flours, things are different. I mean, I'm assuming that you can you take a regular recipe and make it vegan easily?
Well, sometimes you really can. People don't think that you can. And I see some vegan recipes and I'm like, girl, all you forgot was the kitchen sink. Really? And a lot of times I'm like, just try to leave the eggs out. As long as you've got oil in there, you might just be okay. So, you know, there's a lot of times when you can just leave something out, just drop it, and it might just be okay. There's a lot, you know, I don't have any, I mean, for baking cookbooks, I'm kind of lacking in. I know that there's, the girl, I can't think of her name. It's like Vegan Cupcakes Take Over the World, and she's got a cookie one. Those are really good. And I just love Minimalist Baker, and there's some other great resources online if you just Google for vegan baking. But I'll tell you what, as long as you've got oil in your recipe, you can kind of drop the eggs. You can just sub in any plant milk instead of regular milk. There's the process that I like about it. Like, okay, I grew up Crisco and eggs and butter, like all the real deals. So for me, just figuring out, well, gluten-free, yeah, but once you figure it out, if you can get a vegan recipe that works, just switch it out to like like we do our own gluten-free flour mix. We have one for bread and one for cake, but that like Bob's Red Mill 1-to-1, the vegan one, is great. It's great. And you can sub that for your all-purpose flour and you'll be good to go. Swear, it works great as a just dropping it in for a conversion. But I always say, like, what's that question? Has being vegan helped
your mental health? Has being vegan helped your mental health?
Oof. No. I mean, nope.
But it hasn't, I would assume that it hasn't hurt it either.
It hasn't hurt it. I mean, it's just part of being more mindful, I guess.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that's been really helpful. It's caused me to be more mindful. I think I eat less now, and when I eat, it's healthier. So I'm, you know, when I'm at home, we eat a lot of, spill my water. When I'm at home, we eat a lot of just like what I've got in the fridge and then what we can get from the farm. So yeah, I do tend to eat more fruits and vegetables now, which can't be bad for my brain at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're running out of time. I wanted to, a couple of things. So one is, I wanted to point out, somebody else also shared, I love this. Sometimes I call my mom up to get the recipe and then bake or cook it. And it makes me also happy that she can still teach me something and that we're connecting with something we both enjoy. And I just want to point out to that, we haven't touched on that, but one of the things we've really been talking a lot about during this time of what we've been calling physical distancing, because we don't like that phrase social distance, because we're social beings. So we long to be connected. And so I love that, because I want to just raise that the other thing baking has the potential to do is to connect us. I love the two people mentioned that about the recipes and how feeling connected to people. And then I'm also seeing lots of people baking for each other. So it's like, okay, I'm baking something and now I'm sharing it. So that's another way. I mean, I think in this time when we're having to physically distance, baking is a great way to socially connect. So I love that.
Yeah.
And then I also want to give a shout out to you, because I just noticed I hadn't before that you've got your little NAMI pin on.
Look how good I am.
So I love that. So thank you. I just want to point out that Sascha, again, has shared her stories many times, has volunteered with us, and she's such a huge mental health advocate. And one of the ways that you do that is really just by being authentically you and sharing your powerful story and just being you. So thank you for that. And then I also just wanted to give you an opportunity to tell us about what is Skull and Cakebones doing right now, and tell us where you are, because some folks may not be familiar with your bakery. So tell us what you're doing right now. I know all the bakeries are doing a little bit something different right now during this time.
Yes, so we have pivoted, like most people have had to pivot. We pivoted into doing delivery and shipping only. We've come up with all new product lines and things like baking mixes and cake mixes and frosting and snacks and healthy things and ways to make your life easier at home, but also activities and things that you can do as a family, and when you've got the kids around. We're still doing our wholesale to Whole Foods and H-E-B and Wheatsville and all of our other small markets around town. So that's been really great. I think our staff feels really good. Oh, thanks, that's us. Yeah, and you can find our shopping cart online to order from us. It's actually been really, it's been good. We had that moment where we cried and thought we were going to lose it all. And then I just remembered what has gotten me through. You just find a pinpoint of light. There's got to be a pinpoint of light somewhere, and you just find it in the dark, and you just go towards it, and it'll get bigger as you get closer. And I just said, we're going towards the light. And so we've been baking for the assisted living place and baking for our local frontline workers and dropping things off at H-E-B and dropping things off for our neighbors, because that's who we are. Our community means so much to us, and we're all going through this. It's not really just about us. So we've been trying to take
beautiful. I love that. That gave me chills, because I love that, because I think that's part of what we all have to try to be doing right now, right? Is again, it's the light, the positivity, whatever that is. But I love that notion of that little, it's just a little pinhole of light, and you just got to find that and move toward that. And so that's a beautiful image. And I love the image that you shared with the mugs as well, again, about the beauty of that. Again, that Skull and Cakebones. And let's see, okay, we've got one more thing that came through. Somebody just said, thank you so much, Sascha, for sharing your story. My daughter has bipolar 2, and we're both vegan. And so she said all the same things I just. She loved the mug analogy, being chipped and cracked, but still beautiful. I love that again. And she was just expressing her thanks for all of that. And thank you for, again, continuing to be your own light, because you definitely are that. I've been loving watching you on Instagram, doing some of the baking on there as well. And you're always such a source of light for our community in that respect. So thank you for that. Thank you for joining us today and teaching us this very simple mug cake. Okay, everybody, we're going to get that recipe out to you so that you'll get a chance. If you didn't catch it while Sascha was going through it, you'll get an opportunity to do that on your own, because we'll send you that recipe. And visit Skull and Cakebones at skullandcakebones.com to check out some of the stuff that you can order online as well. And so we just want to thank you, as always, for being a great partner to us. Again, everyone, we'll be back next Thursday at 11 o'clock to talk about mental health crisis. So come join us for that and share that with your friends and your community. And thank you again, Sascha, for joining us. This was a fun, light way. We've been doing some heavy topics, so this was kind of fun just to get to see you and bake with you. And I look forward to seeing you again in person and giving you a big hug. But until then, everyone stay healthy, be well, and we'll be seeing you again next Thursday. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks for having me.